Welcome back. Several major television networks said that the Democrat Joe Biden captured the U.S. presidency on Saturday as voters narrowly rebuffed the Republican incumbent Donald Trump's leadership and embraced Biden's promise to fight the coronavirus pandemic and fix the economy in a divided nation. We have more details in the coming report. Several major television networks said Democrat Joe Biden captured the U.S. presidency on Saturday as he projected victory, which came after 4 days of nail-biting suspense over the outcome of Tuesday's election, with the counting of votes in a handful of battleground states still going on thanks to a flood of mail-in ballots. Loud cheers erupted in the halls of the hotel where Biden aides were staying and around the country. In Park Slope, Brooklyn, crowds of people gathered in the streets, breaking out in cheers, jumping up and down and banging pots. Across Tacoma Park, Maryland, a liberal city bordering the capital, cheers erupted and some banged pots and plans on their approaches. When the former vice president entered the White House on January 20, the oldest person to assume the office, aging 78, he likely would face a difficult task governing in a deeply polarized Washington, underscored by a record nationwide voter turnout in a fight to the finish. Biden said on Friday he expected to win the race but stopped short of giving a victory speech. A Trump advisor acknowledged on Friday that the race had tilted against Trump but said the president was not ready to admit defeat. Biden, who has spent half a century in public life as a U.S. Senator and then Vice President under Trump's predecessor, Barack Obama, will inherit a nation of turmoil over the coronavirus pandemic and the related economic slowdown. Both sides characterized in 2020 election as one of the most crucial in U.S. history, as important as votes during the 1960s Civil War and the 1930s Great Depression. The election drama is likely to play out for weeks, if not months. Trump, 74, is contesting the vote in the courts, but legal experts said his challenges had little chance of affecting the outcome. Among the contradictions we have here, Joe Biden is the oldest American president, oldest to occupy the White House, and he was the 5th youngest to serve in the Senate. To shed more details on the victory of Biden and the divided United States in this critical period of the coronavirus pandemic, of the economy, of the political leadership in general of America, we are very much delighted to have with us via phone Dr. Hassan Wagih, Professor of Political Science. A very good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Sir, now, Biden occupies the White House. And as I was saying, he started that early. He was the 5th youngest to serve in the Senate. Do you think that his long career in politics and his experience is going to be the key element of knowing well how to unite the Americans under his leadership in this divided United States? Because, as I have also said, the pandemic, the economy, what happened with the movement of Black Lives Matter, for example, a number of issues I think are going to be challenges in front of the new president. How do you see this, sir?
Yes, of course, challenges facing Biden. But I believe that if the difference between Trump and Biden in terms of votes is increasing in a very good pace, I think it will end up by refusing all the demands by Trump, and the Americans would reunite, because actually what I have seen through friends and through some people over there is that they longed indeed to have the American values when it comes to the democratic values that it was cultivated in their consciousness for a long period of time. They longed to see that. They saw to it that Trump is violating that. And Biden is from the very inner circles of the system. Also, Trump is an outsider, a businessman who came and they violated for them so many of the issues. To the extent that when we have 77% of the Jewish community in the United States have voted already for Biden, despite the fact that Trump has done for Israel like no one previous president has already done for them for many years. So this means what? If you analyze this segment, you can find that the American Jewish community saw to it that Trump dealing with COVID was disastrous for them. The health care is not good for them. Also, it's a very important thing to recognize that many of the Jewish community in the United States are for the two states in Palestine. They don't want to leave the whole thing like what the road of Trump was seeking. It was one-way ticket. So they want a two-way ticket with Iran. They want two states because it is safer for them for the long term. So I think that everything will be rectified and reformed so long as these values are there. It will have the support of the Americans, and Trump will be convinced in the final analysis that the overwhelming majority or the people who really voted for the other guy, not for him.
This was my coming question, sir, regarding the other side of the coin. This voting process or this presidential election in the United States is totally different than any other campaign or any other presidential elections. Whether because of the voting via mail, whether because of the economy, whether because of the coronavirus pandemic, whether of even taking a look at the modern history of the United States, I think Donald Trump is the first American president not to be re-elected since George Bush, as far as I remember. So how do you see the Americans' reaction toward that? And how do you see Trump's reaction toward that, and also his supporters? Do you think that a different reaction or an unexpected reaction is going to take place on the ground in the United States after announcing the victory of Joe Biden?
Actually, I would think that the discourse of litigation and grand conspiracy by Trump will have some kind of maybe troubles, but the Supreme Court and the higher level authorities in the American law officials will not reconsider what he wants to say if the difference in voting is big. This is my expectation, but let us wait and see in what way Trump is going to seek his way through.
So, Dr. Hassan Wagih, Professor of Political Science, thank you very much for your input, sir. Have a very good evening. And to continue with the American presidential elections and the victory of Biden, he has channeled personal tragedy into a heart-on enslaved compassion for everyday Americans. But President-elect Joe Biden faces the challenge of a lifetime as he inherits a nation both traumatized and spellbound by his White House predecessor. Details. A stalwart of American political life for decades, Joe Biden, 77, has experienced many ups and downs during his long career in Washington. But in the end, he won the biggest prize of all, the presidency, after edging out President Donald Trump. Active in local politics in Delaware, Biden scored a major surprise at just 30 when he ousted a well-established Republican senator in 1972 election. Just a few weeks later, Biden's wife and daughter died in a car accident. He thought of resigning to take care of his injured sons, Beau and Hunter, but he was persuaded to stay on and was sworn in on January 5, 1973. He was re-elected to the upper house of Congress continuously until 2008. In the 1970s, he opposed a government policy known as busing, which organized buses to transport black children to predominantly white schools to promote co-education. Senator Kamala Harris attacked him over his stance during this year's Democratic primary race. Nevertheless, he chose her as his running mate. In 1978, Biden joined the race for the White House for the first time, buoyed by his image as a dashing man in his 40s and starting as a favorite among many in his party. But he crashed out in humiliating style after making a series of exaggerations about his past and a scandal over passages in his campaign speeches. Biden was also a key architect of broader criminal justice reforms that have drawn much criticism. The 1994 crime law is considered by some to be responsible for the explosion in U.S. prisoner numbers and also the overrepresentation of African Americans in jail. Its negative impact was due in part to severely punishing crack users, a drug more often consumed in poor neighborhoods. He again has said that his stance was a mistake in his hindsight. Biden was chosen by Barack Obama as his vice presidential candidate and entered the White House with him in January 2009 in the middle of the global financial crisis. In 2019, he launched his campaign to beat Donald Trump and win the White House at last. After a difficult start, he bounced back to victory in the Democratic primaries, boosted by his support among African Americans, and became the party's presidential candidate. In the end, after a campaign like no other, held amid the coronavirus pandemic, he went on to deny Trump a second term.
Joe Biden.
And to continue our coverage of Joe Biden's victory and being the new American president, we are very much delighted to have with us via phone Ambassador Hussein Hariri, former Assistant Foreign Minister. A very good evening to you, sir.
Good evening, madam.
Sir, can I consider this victory is a victory of a veteran politician against a businessman who was considered as a newcomer to the world of politics?
Well, this today is a victory for American democracy and democracy around the world. President Trump was not a traditional American statesman or American politician. Mm-hmm. He has never been elected to Congress. He has never been elected to any elected office. As a matter of fact, whether even in his state, New York State. Mm-hmm. Of course, electing President-elect Joe Biden is a departure or the renewal of American political traditions. Mr. Joe Biden, the President-elect, the 46th President of the United States of America, has 5 decades behind him in American politics and in international relations. Mm-hmm. And this reminds me of the late American President, George Bush father. And American presidents who have an extensive experience in foreign relations and in domestic politics usually have proven to be very effective presidents and unifier. They unite the American people behind their policies. They are politicians of consensus. They try to reach across the aisle, as the saying goes in the United States. So if they belong to the Republican Party, they work with Democrats, and if it's a Democratic administration, they work with Republicans. So I guess today America needs a president with such a political profile, a president able and capable and experienced to reach across the aisle for the sake of the American people and international peace and security.
Sir, let me focus on one word which was really ear-catching, unifiers. Do you think that despite the fact that the race was too close and just 2 hours ago we did not know who is going to occupy the White House, and till the moment, nobody, I think, can expect the reaction of Trump supporters on the ground or Trump himself on the ground. Do you think the experience you were talking about and being a unifier, as you described Joe Biden as a Democrat, do you think that this is going to be his first challenge as a president, and will he be able to do so, having in mind that it's going to be not a very easy task, it's going to be, on the contrary, a very hard one?
I believe that the road ahead won't be easy, because the American society is highly polarized. President-elect Biden got 74 million votes. President Trump got 70 million votes. So that shows you that the Americans are divided, highly polarized politically and economically and maybe socially. And I don't want to say racially, but they have racial problems that were exacerbated by some positions and some statements by President Trump. Now, the challenge ahead, the task ahead for President-elect Joe Biden is to work hard with both Democrats and Republicans to heal the wounds of the last 4 years, to overcome as much as they can, as much as possible, the obstacles and the divisions that have destabilized American society and almost paralyzed American politics. So today, after the announcement of the election victory of President-elect Biden, he tweeted saying that I'm honored to be elected, and I'm going to be the president for all Americans, whether those who voted for me and for those who did not vote for me. So I guess this is a good beginning. It's a very effective message for those who supported President Trump, who voted for President Trump in the elections. The message is that, thank you, you voted for me, whether you voted for me or you voted for the Republican candidate, in this case President Trump. I'm going to exercise the duties of my office as a president for all Americans.
Yeah.
Now, now we are waiting, if it will ever come, for the concession speech on the part of President Trump.
Yeah. Sir,
some people doubt that he will give a concession speech, but I guess Republican leaders in the Congress, particularly in Senate, would do their best to convince him to give the concession speech.
Yeah. Sir, when I was reading about the whole story, you know, it was occupying the minds of all people all over the planet in the past few days. There was a statement which said if Trump is going to be defeated, it's not Biden who is going to defeat him. Trump is going to be defeated by COVID-19 and George Floyd. If you may elaborate on that.
Well, what's surprising, madam, President Trump got many votes in the red states that are badly hit by the COVID-19. And according to exit polls, 34% of voters thought that the economy is the question uppermost on their minds. And COVID-19 came later, maybe a third. And the second thing was unemployment. And this was a surprise, that those states who have suffered most of the COVID-19, whether infected people or those people who passed away because of being infected by this COVID-19, voted for Mr. Trump, despite the fact that during the last 5 months, the way he managed the pandemic and the way he talked to the nation about it, trying to underestimate the danger of the COVID-19. Despite all this, the American voter, or those who supported him, just neglected this question. I believe that during the last 4 years, American society was mobilized. American society was mobilized, or half of the American society was mobilized against President Trump and the way he ruled the United States.
Yeah.
And as I said earlier, he is not a politician. He has never been elected to a public office. And as you said, Madam, in your first question, he is a billionaire. And he said on many occasions, I'm not ready to lose. I'm not accustomed to losing. So this is maybe the spirit that is that goes with businessmen or billionaires.
Yep.
But this is not the spirit or the position that should be taken by politicians or by presidents, particularly if he is the President of the United States of America.
Ambassador Hariri, one final question, if you permit me. The presence or the appearance of former American President Barack Obama and former American Minister of State Hillary Clinton in the campaign of Joe Biden and being behind him and being with him in many of his campaigns or his tours worried people, certain amount of people, whether inside America or outside America. And speaking about their policy, speaking about their way of dealing with things inside and outside, do you think that this is another issue which we should take into consideration, or this is the policy or the new administration is going to be the new administration with or without the presence of those two?
Well, first of all, now we are dealing with President-elect Joe Biden. He is no longer the vice president of President Obama. The second point that I would like to stress, Madam, is that 10 years, a whole decade separates us from the what's called the Arab Spring, and today many things have changed. Many things have changed in the Arab world. Many things have changed in the Middle East. And American positions vis-a-vis the Arab world have also changed. Politics, Madam, politics everywhere have never been static. Politics are dynamic. And I guess we will be dealing with the 46th President of the United States, President-elect Joe Biden, and not the Vice President of former President Barack Obama, Vice President Joe Biden.
Yeah.
And let me, a final point, usually vice presidents in the United States have not, don't have the final word in policies and in decisions. And we have to bear that in mind when we are talking about President-elect Joe Biden. My personal belief is that President-elect Joe Biden, with his experience in American politics and his extensive experience in international relations, I guess he would adopt policies that are commensurate with the changes that have taken place in the Middle East in general and in Egypt in particular.
Yeah.
President-elect Joe Biden was the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee for 15 years. So we are dealing with a man, with an American statesman who has a large international experience that would impact effectively and constructively on his policies in the Middle East.
Ambassador Hussein Hariri, former Assistant Foreign Minister, thank you very much for your input, sir. Always an added value to Nile TV International screen. Have a very good evening. And to continue with our Panorama news, Donald Trump has boasted of being a typical leader, but he has now entered a rare club. He will definitely not appreciate U.S. presidents who have lost re-election. Since World War II, only 2 other presidents who sought a second term from voters have failed: Jimmy Carter and George W. Bush. U.S. TV networks called the race on Saturday for Democrat Joe Biden, despite the Republican seizing on the power of incumbency. Trump held rallies across the country in front of Air Force One, insisted on putting his name on the 150 million pandemic stimulus checks to Americans, and delivered his Republican convention speech at the White House. His actions sparked accusations Trump violated the Hatch Act, which restricts the use of the federal government for political activity. For Trump, the first president never to have previously held the elected office or a military leadership position, the White House helped normalize a volatile man better known earlier to Americans as a television celebrity. Back home to President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who stressed that the Bedouin residential communities must direct to support the developmental projects in Sinai in the frame of the state's strategy to achieve a comprehensive development in the governorate. The president's remarks came during his meeting on Saturday with Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli, as well as President's Assistant for National and Strategic Projects, Minister of International Cooperation, and a number of high-ranking officials. Presidential spokesperson Ambassador Bassam Radi said that during the meeting, the head of state instructed them to hold direct contacts with citizens in the developmental projects areas in a bid to establish a community dialogue that contributes in achieving the best construction scenarios for the Bedouin societies. The meeting also went over efforts exerted to upgrade main roads and access in El Arish city, as well as the undergoing plan to develop Sharm el-Sheikh city. President el-Sisi also directed to speed up projects being implemented in South Sinai province. Still with our local news, polls opened in several electoral districts across Egypt on Saturday morning to kick off voting in the second phase of Egypt's House of Representatives elections. Around 9,468 polling stations opened their doors for voting on Saturday, and they are going to be opened also on Sunday from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Cairo local time. The second phase of the parliamentary elections covered 13 governorates: Cairo, Al-Qalyubiyya, الدقهلية، المنوفية، الغربية، كفر الشيخ، الشرقية، دمياط، بورسعيد، الإسماعيلية، Suez, North Sinai, and South Sinai. Around 31 million Egyptians are eligible to cast their ballots in the second phase. Some 2,083 candidates are competing for 70 individual seats, while 284 candidates are competing under the list system in 2 districts. The results for the second stage are set to be announced on November 15th. Runoffs are due to be held later in November and December, and the winners will take their seats in Parliament in January 2021. President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has cast his ballot on Saturday at Martyr Mustafa Yusri Abu Umaira School in Heliopolis district in Cairo in the second phase of the parliamentary elections, which is held on the 7th and 8th of November. In addition, a number of ministers and state officials voted in polling stations, as the elections are being held under strict preventive measures amid the coronavirus pandemic. Minister of Foreign Affairs Sameh Shukri, Minister of Trade and Industry Niveen Gama, Higher Education and Scientific Research Minister Khaled Abdel Ghaffar, and Environment Minister Yasmin Fuad casted their ballots. Minister of Interior Mahmoud Tawfiq, Minister of Endowments Dr. Muhammad Mukhtar Gum'a headed to their polling stations as well. Pope Tawadros II, the head of the Egyptian Orthodox Church, also cast his ballot in Cairo's Al-Waili neighborhood. The head of Egypt's National Election Authority, the NEA, Councillor Lashin Ibrahim, stated that voting in the second stage of the Egyptian House of Representatives elections goes smoothly since the start of the elections on Saturday. Ibrahim has called on citizens to head to polling stations and cast their ballots. In a press remarks, Ibrahim affirmed the importance that citizens, including youth and women, choose their representatives inside the parliament, which would be a proof of their love for the nation. Ibrahim also called on youth, whom he referred to as the present and future of Egypt, to cast their votes and participate in making the future. He also stressed the need to abide by preventive measures against the coronavirus, including wearing masks and maintaining social distance during the voting process. The head of the National Media Authority, Hussein Zain, stated that the national media screens and broadcasts are following up the process of Egyptian voting in the ballot boxes for the parliamentary elections. He said Egypt is witnessing a fruitful democratic atmosphere through the elections under the wise leadership of President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi. Zain's remarks came during casting his vote in the parliament elections in one of Cairo's districts. The head of the NMA added that the national media, radio and TV are covering the elections process and providing a distinguished professional media coverage nationwide of all elections activities by a network of correspondents. Prime Minister Dr. Mustafa Madbouli followed up measures of dealing with shifts of severe air pollution in Great Cairo and Delta during the period of the beginning of September until the 21st of last October. In a report filed by Minister of Environment Dr. Yasmin Fuad to Dr. Madbouli, the minister said that 97% of assembling locations were monitored, in addition to 691 locations of rice straw assembling in Delta were activated. The report also said that 95 ministry axes were activated to monitor firing of agricultural and solid waste in open places. Foreign Ministry spokesperson Councillor Ahmed Hafez said Egypt condemned Israel's demolition of over 70 houses in a Palestinian village in the occupied West Bank, leaving tens of people and children homeless. In an official statement, Hafez denounced the move, which saw Israel forces razing the majority of Bedouin villages of the village. Hafez described the move as a clear violation of international legitimacy and the resolutions of international humanitarian law. Armenia reported Saturday that fierce combat with Azerbaijani forces took place overnight near the town of Shusha, a key stronghold in the disputed Nagorno-Karabakh region.